What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to go over some very interesting comments that Matthew Lillard made in a interview. Now, what I'll just do, let's just play the thing. We'll hear what he says, and then I'll discuss, in my opinion, what he means by it, because I have a feeling it's not just verbatim, what he said.
I'm really excited. I think that there's a lot of candidly, I don't want to screw it up. And I've said that now a couple times, but I hope that fans are as excited about me coming back as I am. I mean, I've been petitioning to be, I've said for the last 20 years that Stu is still alive. And I'm finally glad I get to sort of prove that.
Okay, so I've seen people run kind of in both directions. I personally just find it to be fun. I've said that a lot. When it comes to the Stu thing, I've said this for years now on the channel. I say it with respect to somebody like Steven of Craven Something Scary. I can appreciate it. I think that, not him, but I think some people maybe can take it too far. But at the same time, I've always said, as long as they don't outright say he's dead, which really, they've always kind of played around. And when I say always, I guess like really 5 and 6, right? They've played around with it. They've had opportunities to just flat out say, no, he's dead. Also, even like interviews, like, I'm talking about just specifically the movie. You go to interviews and you go back to like Radio Silence, they would never actually just outright say it. Or Kevin Williamson, all it really takes is anybody saying for sure, the guy is dead. And then, yeah, you can't really go any further than it. But I've always thought that they've kind of almost leaned into it. And they've allowed, part of the fandom to do this, like Stu Lives type situation. They've allowed that. And they could stop it at any moment. So I just want to say that, I've said that for years at this point, but just in case. So when it comes to this, and I guess, well, actually, with all of that stuff being said, okay, I still think the guy is dead. I still think Stu is dead. And it definitely is interesting, how he says it, right? Because he's talking about, and he's right. I mean, for the last several years, every time a new Scream movie comes out, he's being interviewed for something else, and he brings it up, and he really is on like the Stu train of like, hey, yeah, that character's still alive. So I will say, granted, like the way he says it definitely makes it seem like, he's been saying he's alive, and he's ready to like prove that. He's excited to prove it. I believe he means it as in like the concept of Stu, like Stu as a character is back. And I think that, and I've said this before, like that's where I think this movie can have a lot of fun, and that's where this movie I think can be impactful. Like you don't just do it. I think you have to have a reason, and it's got to be well done. But like, to bring him back and to bring him back, most likely as AI, right? I do think that's a good concept. I think that's very timely. I think that works. And, as long as you can connect that in some, emotional, symbolism type thing to a Sydney and push the story, I think that's cool. And at the same time, you're organically kind of like fulfilling his wish. You know what I mean? You are bringing Stu back. Because I think that's a thing you can say. If Stu is in this movie for 5 minutes, and, the rumors are he did not film, that many days. And I'm really trying to stay away from that stuff because, I don't know, you see how many days somebody films a movie. It's like, okay, well, that could give away, certain elements of it. I have seen people talk about how long Matthew was on set, but, it doesn't sound like he's in the movie all that much, right? But if he's in it 5 minutes, I don't care how long he's in it. I think you can definitively say, like, Stu was back. Not necessarily like the 96 character, right? Because if it's AI, it's not truly him, but Stu as almost a concept is brought back. And I don't know if he's thinking like that fast on his feet and he's saying that in the interview. He could literally be saying like Stu is back. I don't really believe it. I've entertained it. I've said like, hey, if they're going to do it, you've got to be able to do it right. And, you might lose some people by doing it. I don't know if they would lose me. Like factually, I feel like, bringing back very, in my opinion, dead characters and having me accept it is something you can really only talk about so much or feel like you can only get so far to an answer. When it happens, that's totally different, right? So, like, I can say I'd be okay, not okay with it. Ultimately, it's like when it happens on screen, that kind of raw emotion, I can't really predict that, ahead of time. But I personally believe, he is dead. And I personally believe the whole thing is just they're using him in some sort of AI way to mess with Sydney and gang. So that's what I've thought. And I still think you can have best of both worlds. Like, I think that can be true. And I think you can have his comments also be true with, proving that he's alive. Interesting way of saying it for sure. If it's true, if he's not alive, right? He's dead and it's just all AI. I would look back at that comment and say there's probably better ways, of saying that, because it's more about a theme of like it's more of he's back versus he's alive. I do feel like, I'll throw you a bone, if you're on the other side and you disagree with what I've said so far, I'll throw it to you and say, okay, I do agree with the concept of saying alive and back. Those are probably two different things, because like a dead character can be brought back, say, in a prequel, and like I don't even know what you'd want to say with that situation, right? Like they're technically back, and they are alive. That's maybe a weird example, right? But if you bring, say, you do another movie, and say you bring the character back, but you put that scene's like a flashback, and it puts it in a previous movie before they died. You would say they're back. You wouldn't say they're alive in the new movie. You know what I mean? It's the 9th movie of a franchise. You say that this character returns or this character is back. You don't necessarily say they're alive. So you could nitpick that, and you could say that's kind of the issue with how he said it, if he's lying. But we'll see. Maybe he's just outright saying it. Maybe he's just outright saying Stu's alive, and I'll take the loss there, when the movie comes out. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.